Welcome on the Conducting Research in Spanish Comics panel. We're going to listen Álvaro, Pons, Inmaculada, Corcho, Rosi. Each of them will speak 15-20 minutes. And I'll tell you when you only have 1 minute left. Please ask your questions after the 3 presentations. And since you have all the detailed presentations of the speakers in the booklets, I just say a few words about each of them so that we can hear them directly. Álvaro Pons is an associate professor at the University of Valencia, comic critic, popularizer, and is also director of the chair of comic studies and the Aula de Cómic at the University of Valencia. Bueno, Álvaro, te escuchamos entonces.
This is a brief presentation about what we're doing on comic research in the University of Valencia. Well, basically, all the research in comic is about the creation in 2019 of the chair of comic studies between the ISM Foundation. This is a foundation from a publishing house that is specialized in textbooks and children literature, and the University of Valencia. The chair is an institutional structure provided in the Spanish university laws, which allows the collaboration between private companies and the university. And the company provides all the funds that we need for carry out all the activities on the chair. The chair has 3 axes. Three axes of action. One is dissemination, another one is training, and another one is research. The idea is to allow synergies between these 3 axes of action. Well, first of all, the dissemination is based on another structure in the universities, the Aula de Cómic, the comic classroom. This is the way that cultural activities are managed in the University of Valencia, in the Vice-Rectorate of Culture. We have classrooms of music, of literature, poetry, cinema. This is an umbrella to cover all the activities that we have about these items, these topics. With the Aula de Cómic, we have different activities. We have presentations, comic festivals. In fact, we have the Jornadas del Cómic. This is a festival, a little festival of comic, but we have about 3,000 assistants in the last edition with COVID restrictions. We have presentations with Spanish authors, international authors. This is an example, the presentation of Peter Bach. We have exhibitions, a lot of exhibitions, roundtables, courses, workshops. And we have also projects with other institutions to promote comics. For example, we have this Inventario del TV Valenciano. This is a catalog of comic authors of Valencia, the local region of Valencia. This was made for the Festival of Angoulême in 2020. And another project we have now in this moment is Comic Meet Accent. This is a publication for the next Frankfurt Book Fair to be held the next month in Frankfurt, in Germany. And this is made in collaboration with ACE, that is Cultural Action Spain. We have also this other line of action that is the training. The most important is these 2 courses, is the Master on Comic and Education and the Translation Comics Diploma that we have in this moment in the 4th edition of the Master of Comic Education and the 2nd edition, the Translation of Comics. And this is in collaboration with different universities. We are very happy with these 2 lines of formation, of training. But we have also little courses, workshops about self-edition, comic with a gender perspective, cultural management of comics, reading promotion through the comic. We have a lot of workshops about it. But of course, we are also interested in research. Well, the idea is to have production of research, collaboration, promotion of the research, and innovation, obviously. Well, about the production of research, well, we work in our own production, our own research with the collaborators of the Chair of Comic Studies. We have presented a lot of communication in conferences. We have papers published in different publications. And in the last year, we have all these publications. But this is not our main idea. Our main idea is to promote the research inside the university. One of the ways to promote the research in the university is to establish research grants or prizes to the best PhD thesis or the final degree works or final master works. We have this prize to the best final degree project, final master project, and PhD thesis, with in common with the Foundation Arte de Volar of Antonio Altarriba, and we give prizes of 500 euros, 1,000 euros, and 1,500 euros. We are very happy with it because in the last edition we have about 36 applicants for this prize. The quantity, and we are growing every year. And during the next month, we will present the Comic Research Grant from the Cátedra, from the Chair of Comic Studies and the Arte de Volar Foundation, is to give 3,000 euros to develop our research about comics, think about comics. Well, but this idea, we suppose that this is a good idea, but we know that the problem of the students to access to the research about comics is to the access to the bibliographical references. We have a problem. In the libraries of the university, we don't have references on comic. In particular, in the University of Valencia, we have about 100 books about comics, only 100 books. And it's a good collection now, comparing with other universities. It's terrible. So our first problem that we must solve was to access to the bibliographical references. And the solution was to establish a section, a special section of theory of comics in the Humanities Library, John Regla. This is the main Humanities Library of the University of Valencia. And we made this special section with about 1,200 references about comics. We have books, journals. We have, for example, the comic journal, about more than a half of the total collection of the comic journal. Practically all the journals published in Spain, fun things about comic theory. This is my personal collection, of course, that I have donated to the university, but it's the way that we begin to this section. Now, the library is buying every book that appears about comic theory, and we know that is very used in this moment. It's very interesting. This is the first. The second, access to the resources, access to the comics. And this is another problem. When a student wants to do research about a collection or an author, the problem is to access to the comics. Because the libraries don't have collection of comics, it's very complicated to access, to buy the comics in any case. So we need a public center that has all this collection. They must have all this collection. But we don't have this center, so we must create it. And we have working in the creation of the Center for the Studies and Preservation of Cultural Legacy of Comics. This is called the Center Micharmut, and is a hybrid center between the University of Valencia and the local government of the city of Valencia, the town hall. It's called the Mitcharmut Comic Center. Evidently, it's a tribute to Mitcharmut and Enrique Bosch, that, in my opinion, is the most important author in the last 40 years. In fact, the poster of the training school is from Mitcharmut. And I think that his works is looking to the tradition of the comic, but making to evolve it and launching it to the future. It's incredible, the work of Mitcharmut. It's years ahead, totally, of the works that we are now looking. And the idea of the center is to have a good collection of comics, to promote the research about this collection, and with this research, doing the possibility of have training, dissemination that give back to the society the public investment and effort in the creation of the cultural center, the center. Well, the main collection of the center will be composed by private donations, loan of donations. We are now negotiating different donations. In particular, we are working with a private collector that has about 150,000 comics. Practically every comic published in Spain from 1916. It's incredible. And it's a private collection that is in a house. And the house don't crash. It's incredible. But we are working with him, and we think that it's okay. And with another private collector with original art, and he has about 8,000 original arts of comics. Practically, half of the collection is about Valencian comic. He has incredible original, like the first cover, the cover of the first number of El Guerrero Antifaz. That is one of the classical comics in Valencia. But it has about 100 pages of El Guerrero Antifaz, Roberto Alcázar y Pedrín. He has the cover of El Sulfato Atómico, the Mortadelo y Filemón. That is incredible. Well, we are working with him. And we are suppose that we will have this collection in the center. The idea is to avoid this image. This image is a terrible image in Paris, December 29, that after Claude Moliterni passed away, all his collection finished in the garbage. I suppose that the proprietary of the flat, when he lives in this moment, arrived to the flat and see garbage and clean flat. Incredible. I talked with a good friend of Claude, it was Tito. He said me that he knows that he has, in example, an original page of Asterix. It has disappeared, this page. So it's supposed to be here in this garbage. It's incredible. And with the center, we want to avoid this. In fact, we have now 3 donations of people who passed away with more than 4,000 comics. The idea is don't lose this legacy, this cultural legacy. We know that Claude Moliterni has personal letters with authors, with publishing houses, with festivals. So it's terrible to lose all these funds. So the idea of the center is not to have again these images. The center is now in works of adaptation. We hope that the works will finish about the end of the year, and the center will be finished and working in March of 2023. And this is mandatory because we have local elections in May, and the politicians want to use the center of propaganda for his electoral propaganda. So the center must be finished in March. It's good in this moment. It's a good news. Well, but we have another problem, is the resistance of professors to include comics in the research, as a research subject. So we must train the professors to use the comic. And we have to create research structures inside the university. And this is practically of the month. We are now working, and we suppose that it will be approved in the next month, is the creation of the research group studies on application of comics, in studies and application of comics. And we have a specialist from philology, sociology, history of art, physiology, medicine, physics, and physics is, education, philosophy. So the idea is to have this interdisciplinary, this wide kind of subject, this different subject, that everyone who wants to use the comic in his research have a specialist in his line of action, in his area, to work about comics in the University of València. And this is a very brief description of that we are working in this moment. This is all.
Thank you very much, Álvaro, for this presentation. Maybe since we have a little bit of time, 4 minutes for questions. Yes. Or we can listen to Inmaculada, the exhibition at the end. Okay.
Are any of those okay? Yeah, it's on. It's on. So any of those resources are available, like digital, online?
Well, the idea is to be digital, to be accessible physically, but one of the ideas of our ideas is to make available digitally. But this is a very complicated question because the amount of work to digitalize 150,000 comics is complicated. But the problem is also about rights, copyright, and copyright is complicated. But we want to have all digitalized.
So you want to see all that, you have to go to Valencia. Okay.
You're welcome. It's difficult, it's very difficult. In the case of Spain, we have the idea of contact with every collector of Spanish comics, a very famous collector of Spanish comics. The idea is to contact him to know which is his collection, because one of the things that we consider is that it's impossible to have everything published in Spain. But we want to know where is this collection, because every one student comes to the center and asks for a terminated collection. It's possible that it's not in the center, but we will know where is this collection. We will address this student to this collector, this private collector, that he has this collection. If we contact with every collector, we will offer him the possibility of in the case, the luctuous case of the Thesing, that his collection came back to the society via the center. This is our idea, but it's a difficult work because we must find every collector in Spain. It's a complicated work, but this is our idea, to avoid this, looking for the collectors, looking for the collections. In this moment, we have talked with different collectors. I have, in this moment, 10 or 12 authors that say me that he want to donate his original art collection. 2 or 3 great collectors in Spain of Spanish comic books are also interested in donate his collection to the center. And in fact, in example, we are now also negotiating with the family of Jesus Cuadrado, that unfortunately dies last month, especially because his collection is very interesting, and to take this collection to the center. This is our idea. But it's a complicated work. It's a complicated task. We have to look for. This must be an active task, looking for the collectors and trying to disseminate the idea of the center in every festival, in every meeting about this possibility.
Thank you very much. We're going to listen to Inmaculada. Inmaculada está aquí.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. Well,
I just present you Inmaculada.
Yeah.
No sé cómo volver a... Inmaculada has a professional career in art culture and culture management. She worked at Museo of Évora, Tour España, Official Credit Institute Foundation, ABC Museum, and she gave lectures on museography, exhibition design, conservation and manipulation of works of art, and she curated and directed many exhibitions projects. We're really happy to...
many things, many things. But well, hello everybody. So sorry because I am now in a just spring activity running from different places in Spain. So sorry because I am preparing the conversation in Spanish, so I'm going to try to explain in English and Spanish and Portuguese. So sorry because maybe I mistake Portuguese, Spanish and English.
Atención, no se escucha muy bien. Tiene que utilizar el micrófono exacto.
¿Ahora? ¿Ahora? Ok. Well.
Sí, perfecto.
Okay. I am explaining. I have prepared the presentation in Spanish, so then I'm going to send you. Then I send you in English for everybody understand everything. So I'm going to share with you in the display. I suppose I can. Yeah. For everybody now, I am speak. I had problem to share the screen.
Te estamos dando el acceso.
Okay.
Jorge lo está solucionando.
Ahora ya deberías poder presentar.
Okay. Well.
Perfecto, ya se ve todo.
¿Sí? Okay. Well, I'm going to try to explain our case in the museum ABC. Speaking to you about the conservation and collection of illustration, because we not have a collection of comics only. We have many pieces of illustration that are that came from different papers, journalists, magazines from our archive. So I'm trying to explain our work with the collection to have a good archive where we can work and many people can research and make another projects about the collection and our pieces. Well, the beginning of the collection ABC is in the 19th century when Torquato Luca de Tena, that is the man in the spring, decided to create a magazine, an illustrated magazine, like in the rest of Europe. So he is the founder and the editor of the Blanco y Negro, that was this first magazine, the first modern illustrated magazine in Spain, really. The magazine appeared in the last 10 years in the 19th century. Then Torquato Luca de Tena created another publication that was ABC. ABC is a current newspaper. He founded in 1903. The best idea of Torquato is create linked to the magazine and the newspaper, create a archive where all the pieces that was published in the magazine and the newspaper were conserved for the future. This philosophy have run along all the 20th century until now. Finally, at the end of the 80s and the 90s, the archive became bien de interés cultural. We have a protected archive in Spain. The graphic archive is formed by for the drawings collection that is our collection in the Museo ABC, and the photography archive. The photography archive is currently in the newspaper because it's the archive that run and the journalists work every day. The collection is formed, but this number you are seeing in the screen is a very the biggest archive of illustration in Spain, and maybe in the world, because there are not papers that remain all the archive along of the history. There are not many journalists that have been cited here in this moment. There are many authors. Most of them we know who are, but there are many another authors we don't have any date, we have any reference, only we have a name, it's the very dark hole in the collection and the history of the illustration in Spain. All the pieces came from different, mainly from Blanco y Negro and ABC, but there are many supplements, magazine, fashion magazine, children's magazine, and another procedence from different publications along all the mainly along the 20th century. All the techniques, plastic techniques has been, or artistic techniques are in our collection. We have oil on canvas, on paper, on carton, or we have wash, collage, pencil, crayon, all of kind of artistic techniques that the author have used along the last century. In the form of the types of the pieces is very varied. We have of canvas of 2 meters, like the first front page in the collection, or we have many cartoons of 3 or 5 centimeters only. So I am telling you all these dates because you have an idea about the complicated and the different material we have found in the collection ABC. Well, this is different pieces from the collection, only so you have an idea. Well, I'm going to try to explain quickly all the order of the organizing and the collection, because this is the moment before, this is before the 2010 when we opened the museum. This is the archive in the newspaper, so it's not so good form to conserve the drawing. Well, but now we have a new place. We create a new place for the conservation with a lithographic characteristics to display and to conserve and to work with the pieces better. This is our archive now. Well, why we have to order? It's important. I would like to tell you that it's important for the collection, little or not, to conserve and to have a good form to conserve the pieces. The best or the main reason is for conservation and security. The first point is how we are going to use this collection. But the main issue is the conservation for the future. How we are conserving this our collection? We are ordered, or we are organized for the user, because we have a museum, a center of art. We need to find and work with pieces for exhibition, for London, for publications. Our idea is make it easy to work with the collection because it's so big. There are many pieces, and we have to do quickly and try to get easily all the material. Then, really, I repeat my previously observation. We have to conserve it, to continue to keep maintain this collection for the future, because this was the idea of the finger, the software. And we have to try to organize for this conservation. So in this way, we have part of the collection, all the collection organized by alphabetic order of name of the author, because for us was the easy way, because we know the chronology of the author, we have the style of the authors, and it is the most quickly way to research all the material. We have organized too. Well, we have all the pieces, but we have a little group of work separated, because their conservation is not very good, because in some moments of the life, the pieces have suffered any float or got microorganisms or something like that, and we have separated to the other of the rest of the collection. And finally, how we have to keep the organized. Well, we have we try, not many people touch the pieces. Well, we have a very little team, so there are not many people working directly with the pieces, but it's important that not many people touch or manage all the pieces. We have a former protocol of movement and conservation, and this is very important, not only for big collection like us, but domestic management of little collection is very important. Have to pair with this way of work with the people. Well, the second point is for us is for all the collection is catalogue, to make a catalog of all the pieces, because the same things that that have told for the conservation. It's very important to have a catalog of the pieces for conservation, for security, and for the use. maybe I can say for the security of the pieces, because there are many archives where the pieces have disappeared, and it's very it's an special country where many pieces have disappeared, even all archives have disappeared. Because we have done here with the security of the pieces. How make a catalog? We have. I would like to explain that will build a good catalog file is the best option, but a very complicated file. But I recommend we have at least a little file, and then we go I don't know, ampliar with big to get the this file. Made all the files with a systematic way. If possible, with the same people working in this, but not always possible. That is our case. We have many people working in this work. And another important idea is to have a continuous work with this catalog, because in our case we have many pieces. We cannot stop to keep all the work, because we have enough time to do all this work, and we need all the information constantly for making exhibition or for publication for another remnant of our piece. And it's important, really, the digitalization, because now it's very important to show all the pieces in web or in another app or in another, and always for security and conservation, because we don't we cannot constantly working directly with the pieces, because it's horrible for the integrity of the pieces. So well, this is another explain of our collection for that people don't know about us. Well, as you saw in the one of the picture I saw before, it's very important for the storage and preservation of the material. Taking have a good space, have a good furniture for conservation, and the material of the conservation. It's very important if you have a little collection at home or in a new space, a cultural center or a library, obviously in a library or a museum.
I'm sorry, Inmaculada,
Yeah.
we have 1 minute left.
Yes.
After
Okay. I
this,
finish.
we can continue the discussion during the questions.
Okay. Okay. I finish quickly. Well, you have to keep a good place to the conservation of the pieces. This is our space. Well, finally, I'm going to try to explain. It's very important always for the collection, comic or another kind of illustration, to have a good way to work for this for exhibition of the pieces. It's very important for the learner to have a secure to have a good way to show the pieces in the space try to show our pieces the best way we have, because it's very important for the conservation, for the value of the pieces that we have conservation for the future. This is a different way to display the pieces, always with care, with security, and if the best informed and understand to put a good diffusion and to show the value of this kind of material. This is only so sorry for my delay, and well, if you have any question.
Thank you very much, Inmaculada. We're going to listen to Rosi's presentation, and then we're gonna have this phase of questions. Rosi Song is a professor of Hispanic Studies at Durham University. She's a specialist in 20th and 21st century Spanish culture and literature. And
thank you. Thank you so much for the invitation, Jorge, to be included in this workshop. I actually feel like an outsider, and I think that what I'm going to talk about is very informal. I'm not actually talking from a more institutional or organized framework, as, for example, Álvaro, a very impressive presentation of what's going on in Valencia, really great to find out, or the collection that we just heard about from Inmaculada. I wanted to share some of my personal experience as a scholar, as a researcher working outside of Spain, and the way that graphic novels and comics are becoming one of the elements of resource for many of us in the US, in US academia and here as well. I actually do not have much experience in the UK again. I've just recently arrived. So most of my experience, or the way that I can tell you how I became more involved working with these sort of kind of resources, is based from the US experience. And I think it's quite representative of the way that we work outside of Spain. I don't know if it is quite useful, but I think that perhaps my experience can give you some ideas about what to think or what are some of the issues that you want to address to make both your work relevant or in contact or aware of sort of the interest that exists outside of people that are mainly working in comics. So one of the things that caught my attention yesterday actually was that comment about one of the presenters from yesterday. Unfortunately, I missed the presentation about how some Spanish institutions are still not receptive about graphic novels or comics, how they are resistant, and perhaps the the sort of the earlier stages of cultural studies as a field or as a practice or as a methodology in Spanish institutions. Clearly, that is not the case in the US. I think that teaching is a lot more free. Research topics is a lot more sort of individually chosen and decided. But we do have a setting in which, while we have a lot of control of what we choose to research on, to work on, to write on, we also have to deal with teaching. And I think that to teach about Spain, particularly from the distance and through a language, I think that suddenly many of us are realizing how useful visual material is to actually bring into the classroom. So one of the ways in which I think that graphic novels have become more relevant in our conversations in US academia was because suddenly many of us were sharing material saying, hey, I'm teaching on the Spanish Civil War. Have you looked at this material? And we're constantly trying to figure a way to bring material into the classroom that can quickly grab students, that doesn't have to deal with the language challenge of either them having to understand Spanish or having to read. And I think that a lot of you are teachers, and we all can agree that students are reading less and less every day. So what's the way to grab them? And I think that if in the 2000s, we all went to the films and we were using visual material that way to actually make relevant what we're talking about in the classroom, that also has sort of fallen out of favor, because film, turns out, is also is too long. You cannot assign films. Then we went to television programs. That, also doesn't quite work because there's a lot. I guess now it has changed a bit, but the subtitling was a problem. Now Netflix is a lot more useful that way. But anyway, you can't really deal in the classroom with a long TV series and so on. So suddenly, like from the viñetas from the earlier on, when these comics start appearing and these graphic novels start appearing, becomes a really sort of, a lot of us in the US grab onto this material as a teaching tool rather than sort of a research tool. And I think that even us growing up, I mean, I come from a very eclectic sort of comic education. I grew up reading Latin American comics, Japanese manga, Korean comics, and dealing with a lot of sort of this visual material and Disney translation in Latin America and so on. And I think that a lot of my colleagues too, right? I mean, we all have this affinity to having grown up with comics. So when we were able to grab on something like that to bring into the classroom, it was an immediate sort of hit. Interestingly, one of the ways that the graphic novel became very present in a very small group of us teaching in the US actually was through migration. So I don't know if you're aware of Juan Zhu's work, Gazpacho Agridulce. And that work somehow became a hit with students. You have the topic of migration, you talk about the topic of memory, you talk about different cultures, miscommunication, stereotypes, and so on. And that book just became one of the standard books to use in Spanish cultural sort of introduction curriculum in the States, and more. And I think that the price range was also very good, right? So you could get that book for 10 euros, then if you have it shipped with even everything, you can hit about 20 euros or so. $20 is about the range that you can assign students to buy something like that will use it on just one class and leave it behind. And somehow students are less allergic to buying comics than buying novels for their classes. So you can actually assign this. So I think that also because students are a lot more familiarized with e-formats and so on, actually, if you have access, and I think that the editors of Juan did very good, because then they started doing access by €5. You could get download e-formats of this book, and it's been a huge hit. Like everybody uses that book. Like when you do introduction to Spanish, when you do introduction to Spanish culture, because of this topic is really sort of, it grabs the attention of students. So it's really interesting when I hear about your conversations about reception and not being taken seriously, because in US sort of academia, comics have become such a important teaching tool. And a lot of us teaching Spanish have discovered this even being more useful, because it really bypasses a lot of the challenges that learning a language represents. So that's one thing. The other thing is that, for example, I'm part of the committee of 20th and 21st century Iberian studies through our professional organization called the Modern Language Association. And one of the things that we did was actually every year during our annual convention, we pick some of the topics for our guaranteed panels or presentation. And actually 4 years ago, we were very quick. And clearly in the US, we all follow sort of what the English departments do, right? So the English teach Alison Beckel of like, we're taking notes, right? They're teaching Mouse, or we're taking notes, or Persepolis or whatever. So the Modern Language Association had already published a companion book about teaching graphic novels in the curriculum. So we knew that that trend was going, right? So they had already done teaching with television, teaching with film. So now it's teaching with comics. And we knew that we were also following that. So for example, our executive committee decided that one of the panels was going to be dedicated to graphic novels in Spain. And that was a very well attended panel, right? So we knew exactly who's working what, how does this go? And for example, it would be really interesting if, for example, through that organization, you can share some of your work through the common rooms, for example, or if publishers can make it to the exhibit hall, because that's one moment in which a lot of people become aware of what's being published in our field. So that's sort of some of the ideas that I would have. I think that working from outside of Spain, a lot of what we focus, or a lot of what we are interested in, sometimes is a question of chance and just becoming aware of what's out there. And I think that clearly requires some effort from the part of a scholar, and to be interested and having to travel. And when you have a whole ocean to travel, sometimes you can, because of a question of resource, time, and so on. But I think that one of the interesting developments with comics is that a lot of young scholars in the US are discovering that not only it's fun to research on this visual material, but actually is incredibly effective in the classroom. So I think that's one thing that you probably want to sort of think about. I think that also in the classroom, we're training students to acquire another sort of visual literacy through drawings and through this kind of material, that we're moving beyond the film into this other type of image sort of communication. We talked yesterday about sort of the metaphor, what's going on with the message and things. And I think those interactions are very engaging to students. Another thing that, for example, in my case, is that even though I personally enjoy comics, it's not something that I work on mainly, but eventually I ended up working through my other interests, right? So I'm interested in what's happening in terms of migration in Spain, and sort of Spain becoming a more plural and actually multi-ethnic and multiracial country. So we have a working group talking about racial relations in Spain. So a lot of the work at Nord or Invita or, you know, Gazpacho Agridulce and so gente de aquí, gente de allá, things like that are becoming very present in our discussion. But also a lot of what we do is suddenly getting this material. So for example, two of the areas that some of my colleagues and I talking about are, for example, in my case, I've been working more and more on food. So food studies is also another sort of burgeoning interdisciplinary area. And suddenly illustration is entering that field as well. I don't know how familiar you are with this kind of publication, but La Tortilla de Patatas, I just started to share it if you wanted to take a look. So for example, food studies is also another way to teach in the US. Food studies grab students' interest through what they do in the everyday, and then you relate it to another culture, you relate it through that another culture, you inspire them to learn the language and so on. So you're always tricking your students in a way to get your attention, but clearly food also is intersecting right now with illustration. A lot of recipe books are coming out in illustrative forms right now. So it's really interesting to think about instruction and illustration sort of in that setting. And I think, for example, Jorge and I are part of a companion that is coming out with Rulage. And I actually write about food and identity through the comics. And also, I have to say that in Toronto Iberic, which is one of the leading publishers right now, academic publishers. So Toronto University Press has a very highly regarded series in Iberian studies called Toronto Iberic, and they already have a companion to Spanish graphic novels that Samuel Amaro and Matthew Marr has published, and that's also becoming sort of like a key reference book for a lot of young scholars right now in the US. Also, another big topic of teaching for us is the Spanish Civil War. I mean, there is no, department in the Spanish section that doesn't teach the Spanish Civil War. We're moving beyond Lorca. We're moving beyond, and suddenly there's a lot of material that you can teach through graphic novels, through images, and so on. So I think that a lot of teachers and scholars are starting to introduce those kind of texts into the classroom. And clearly that also means that at some point or another, these colleagues are gonna write on that topic, right? So interestingly, I think that from hearing this sort of institutional point of view of setting up these places for research, I think that from my individual perspective, and also I think that my experience and the way that you start working on something is quite representative of the experience of a lot of my colleagues in the US, is that actually a lot of what we research starts from the classroom, like what works in the classroom, what can you get away using, and that eventually fuels your research. So the model of teaching research is a very predominant model in the academic culture in the US, and that's one of the things that they try to sell, right? I mean, not always happen, it doesn't always work that way, but I think that is a prevalent model of working. So I think that if you think about creating this workshop, and I think that, like, for example, the Zotero is a form of research, is really important, because what you want is people to be aware of what they can access and what they can use. And I think that even though research and publication is very important, I think that people tend to use these resources if they're useful in what they do. And in the US academia, for example, teaching is just a very important part of that process. And I think that comics and the way that this visual material is becoming more and more relevant to what we were traditionally studying, I think it's it's going to become more and more relevant and important in the next few years. One of the trends that, for example, is really interesting, and I don't know how much of my colleagues are doing this, is that a lot of the novels that we used to teach are being adapted into graphic novels. So for me, the fact that I can teach Tatuaje de Vázquez Montalbán in graphic novel, that is a game changer, right? Because I might think maybe I cannot assign Tatuaje because it's too long for my students to read. But if I can assign a graphic novel, and they might not read it, but I can at least assign that as something, and then I can teach it. That's really important. So you have, you know, El Corazón del Tártaro, like there are these moments of, I don't know if you call it adaptation or translation. And I think that's also another field that probably a lot of scholars are gonna start working. So a lot of this intermediality, a lot of this sort of interdisciplinarity as well. But I think that to think about this material, to think about how you put that material as a form of access, and what sort of practicalities go into play when you want to make that material accessible, it would be something that we can all think about together. And I think I'm happy to share more experiences or answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rosie. And I think we can pass to the question phase. Do you have any questions about any of the?
I've sort of got a half comment, half question. It's coming off the back of what you were just talking about in terms of especially adaptations. I was recently at the Galdós conference in the Canary Islands for the sort of part of the international ongoing program, which they have every 4 years. And one of the big things that we noted this year, especially, was the fact that especially adaptations of Galdós into graphic novels and graphic novels about the life of Galdós are increasingly sort of prevalent and generating a lot of interest. The one thing that I did perceive that seemed to come through from some people was this view that graphic novels or comics can water down the sort of semblance or meaning or richness of an original text. I personally fundamentally disagree with that, but the question I'd have, and I've sort of put this to the room, is how do we challenge that perception, perhaps, that we might be watering down Grandel literature?
Yeah, that's a really good question, but also that question has already been dealt with when we talked about adaptation of literary books in film, like, and I think that, for example, you have generations of students. I mean, this is just a sort of a pedestrian example, but I teach, adaptation of film, of literature to film, for example, and I deal with students who have, it was really interesting to think about generation of students that have read the Harry Potter books and then saw the films, and then you actually have a generation of students right now that you're teaching that have never read the book and only know the film, right? So this is, so you engage that way, but I think that ultimately what you learn and what you end up teaching is that they're not the same thing, right? So when you think about teaching literacy in these different ways of communication, so it's not replacing, but you can think about supplementing, or you can think about the creation of a different way of communication, right? So yes, it is true that you're somehow bypassing, for example, a novel, as I said, maybe I won't teach Tatuaje, but it's not that you are bypassing totally, right? You're just varying a little bit the material that you're using. And I think that what you struggle with in that communication part is to make materials relevant to each group. And I think that we cannot fight the fact that we sort of stay in one place where our students change, right? So, and generations change, culture changes, and you just have to be aware of what's going on, right? So I don't think in terms of more, it's the same thing but watered down, but I would say that you have to be very conscious about what is that you're bringing in, and that what is that new material contributes to what you're teaching, right? So I think there are different ways of explaining what's going on. But yeah, you always have resistance, right? But just think about when I started teaching, like teaching with film was not, and a lot of us that started teaching film didn't even come through film training, right? I mean, it was just one of the things that we're doing. But now that there are film schools, there are film programs, like they bring a different kind of specialization and training, right? And I foresee that with these kind of programs, we'll also have different kind of scholars sort of teaching, comics or graphic novels or whatever, the way you want to explain. And it's also becoming more technical, it's becoming more, it's becoming more rich. Sorry.
Maybe a question for Inmaculada. How do you work in the ABC Museum with students and researchers who want to see material and work on the collections? ¿Nos escuchas, Inma? Pero no te escuchamos. Tienes el micro apagado.
¿Ahora?
Ahora sí.
Yeah. Okay. Well, with the students, how you work with the students? Okay. Well, we organize basically visits to the archive to encourage to know about another way to well, in the case of a student of audiovisual material or fine arts or something like that are very used to use digital way to work, to draw, or to do something. We try to explain there are many other way to work with fine art and to show different style authors to not to copy but to know about the history of the illustration or the comic or something like that, because it's not the comic is not express 20 or 21 century. It's very old. So we try to encourage to know to get a background for work. This is basically our work. And in another way, we work with a student of museography to try to explain and to know the conservation, but it is very theoretical. It's another material, another kind of form of education. So basically in these two ways, for fine art student and for museography or exposition student. Our focus is to make they know about the history of the illustration to complement or his formation. No os escucho yo ahora.
Inma,
Hola.
I had another question.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed your presentation, and the title is fantastic, and the image is really great. I mean, it was fantastic to see the crazy monkeys there, you know, una jaula de monos.
Because the mono is in Spain was the picture in the book.
Yeah.
No os escucho. I don't listen to you.
Okay, can you hear me
Ahora
now,
sí.
Inma? Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
sorry.
Ahora sí.
It's a very similar question to what Agatha was asking, because these 3 days is about the cultural legacy of Iberian and Latin American comics. Is about providing practical tools for researchers, you know, for whoever wants to conduct some research on comics. This wonderful collection at the Museo ABC, you have mentioned the protocols for conservation and for maintaining certain order in the collection. And you mentioned as well to restrict access to personnel, to there is a certain protocol of movement of the works, of the collection, and also of conservation. So what are the, how can the average researcher, you know, any researcher, you know, access those, that collection and work on that collection? Can be done,
Yeah.
or are there any specific things we need to do?
No. Well, I try to explain is this is the way to work, but because not everybody of the team of a team or in a museum and a center working or touch or approach or to the material, to the original material. This is a protocol, a museographic protocol in ABC and another mile of institution on the world. But for people that have to research, student, teachers, investigators, all kind of people have to want to approach our collection. We have only a protocol. We have to know which is the focus or the object of this investigation. We have not a strict rule for this case. For one reason, we have many people research and investigate in the collection. For us, it's very important because we have no time, no people enough to check and to investigate about the collection. It's very easy. Only we have to be in touch with us and explain what is the object of the project, and no more.
And Inma, thank you very much. And a follow-up to this, when I was conducting research on other archives in the Archivo de la Memoria in Salamanca or in Barcelona, in Pabelló de la República or other places, every time I located a source, you know, a material I wanted to take a picture on for my files, for working on it later on, I was charged, I don't know, €1 or, yeah, the average was around €1 per picture. So is that the same thing with the collection at the Museo ABC, or is a different approach?
Not so sorry. I don't understand.
Yeah.
If you have you can.
Can we take pictures? Can we take a picture of?
Well.
Works?
No. Well, not. No, we don't have a picture because the photograph archive is in the newspaper. It's alive because it's an archive. It's alive every day. It's full with many pictures. We search communication and we use the photography for project, for exhibition, but not in the museum. The collection is only drawing because in the 1980 because separated in two archives, drawings and photography.
No, but I mean, can we, as a researcher, can we go to the collection there and take a picture of one of the drawings?
Take a
of one of the originals?
Well, we now we don't have an open web to researching it, but if you have any question or you can find pieces of different author, you can ask and we can give you a link to see or to check any pieces.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Y una pregunta a Inmaculada y Álvaro, si habéis pensado de organizar como curso muy específico para acerca de estudios de catalogación o de conservación, pero quizás juntos, no sé, sería genial.
Bueno, sería maravilloso trabajar con Inmaculada en algún curso de esas características. Sí que desde la Cátedra de Estudios del Cómic le estamos dando vuelta ya desde hace un tiempo a un curso sobre el cómic en el museo, donde hable precisamente de los problemas específicos que tiene, tanto expositivos como de introducción dentro de los procesos de catalogación, porque la catalogación de cómics o de fanzines, por ejemplo, es un reto tremendo, es muy complicado realmente, pero estamos en ello y desde luego con Inmaculada sería un verdadero placer poder realizar un curso así también. Hablaremos pronto, Inmaculada, seguro.
Sí, por favor.
Si podría añadir, la conservación está muy bien, la catalogación está muy bien, pero el acceso a estos materiales es muy... Nosotros, por ejemplo, después del libro de la movida que publicamos, estuvimos en conversación con la Biblioteca Nacional porque ellos tienen muchos materiales que todavía no están digitalizados, catalogados, etc. Y entonces, a partir de estas iniciativas de Digital Humanities y cosas así, habíamos pensado en pedir una beca para poder digitalizar o catalogar muchos de estos materiales que tienen allí. Pero claro, la cuestión es, si se usa uno de estos fondos, entonces hay que garantizar acceso. Y las medidas de acceso era, sí, se puede digitalizar, pero si no estás en una terminal de la Biblioteca Nacional de España no puedes verlo. Entonces dices, sí, tengo aquí el micrófono encendido, sí. Pero claro, si dices, nosotros te damos el dinero, te traemos estudiantes graduados para ayudar en todo este proceso y luego dices que tienes que estar en la Biblioteca Nacional de España a usar uno de sus terminales, entonces no se puede, ¿no? Entonces, creo que conservar, enseñar a conservar, catalogar está muy bien, pero también hay que pensar seriamente qué tipo de acceso se puede dar a la gente para que pueda consultar, enseñar, difundir, y esto es un problema, ¿no? Esto es, digo, un problema, pero bueno, hay que pensarlo.
Es un problema serio, pero que tiene muchas coordenadas, no es el problema. Porque claro, uno de los grandes problemas de la digitalización es el problema de los derechos. Y ahí nos encontramos con un problema que a veces es una losa, es un muro infranqueable. Tú puedes digitalizar, pero no puedes dar acceso público y solo puedes dar, como hace la Biblioteca Nacional, en determinados. Y ahí tenemos un problema que es la ley europea en nuestro caso. Aquí ya tenéis el Brexit, ya no hace falta, pero en el caso de la ley europea de protección de derechos de autor es muy estricta, es muy, muy estricta. Entonces, es muy complicado dar acceso público, pero sí que se puede intentar, que eso es lo que estamos, por ejemplo, en la universidad estamos estudiando, dar acceso vía membresía, hacer miembro de esto y que las personas a través de una plataforma determinada, si se registran y se hacen miembros y cumplen esas condiciones, puedan por lo menos consultarlo sin la posibilidad de descargarlo o de imprimirlo o de utilizarlo. tiene complicaciones legales que dan lugar a complicaciones técnicas. Hay instituciones que la complicación técnica la resuelven, lo puedes ver en este ordenador y ya está. Bueno, pues es una cuestión al final de dinero y de tiempo.
Y estaba pensando también, especialmente trabajando con materiales visuales, ¿no? Por ejemplo, incluso la idea, nosotros estábamos tratando de convencer, ¿no? Pero la gente no va a venir a la Biblioteca Nacional si no puede ver exacto, o sea, por más descriptivo que sea, no se puede reemplazar, por ejemplo, un thumbnail, ¿no? De una imagen que a lo mejor no se puede emplear, pero por lo menos te puede dar una idea de, ok, yo tengo que planear para estar allí, para mirar X, ¿no? Pero esa incapacidad de proveer alguna forma de entender el material que se ha conservado, que se ha catalogado, eso es un gran obstáculo, ¿no? Más allá o sea, yo entiendo los derechos y todo esto, pero realmente para el estudiante o el investigador, etcétera, entender lo que hay o existe o que se puede acceder, yo creo que es uno de los grandes desafíos, ¿no?
Claro, tú tienes que hacer un trabajo en muchas líneas. Por un lado, lo que es la catalogación, la conservación, la digitalización, el acceso, pero por otro lado, la contextualización. Y eso también es una labor que requiere. Da igual que tú puedas acceder a una revista en particular si no sabes cuál era la realidad de producción de esa revista en ese momento, en ese contexto. Entonces, no solo tienes que hacer la ficha de en qué año se publicó, claro, sino que tienes que dar acceso dentro de ese acceso digital a toda una nube de contexto de esa publicación. Todo eso es, al final, trabajo, y eso significa tiempo y dinero. Esa es la realidad. O sea, pero sí, si tú desde el principio tienes clara esa idea, la línea es esa, evidentemente. Nosotros, por ejemplo, tenemos esa idea muy clara, ¿no? De que no se puede sencillamente poner una colección ahí, sino que tú tienes que decir, bueno, es que esta colección a lo mejor son solo 5 números, pero están dentro de un contexto que pasó en tal, y tienes que buscar alrededor para ver o que tal autor está. Hay que favorecer al estudiante, de cierta manera, el que no se meta dentro del mare magnum de información, sino que esa información de alguna manera pueda fluir de una manera natural hacia el estudiante, porque si no, buscar puede ser muy arduo.
Es que eso, o sea, eso es muy necesario para la labor del investigador, ¿no? Del estudiante en este caso, quien sea, para ayudar en esa labor, ¿no? Pero claro, también lo que decía Rosi es la accesibilidad. O sea, cuán difícil o cuán fácil es acceder a esos fondos, ¿no? Y el ejemplo que yo ponía es que al hacer mi investigación durante el doctorado, pues en cada archivo me encontraba el problema de sí, puedes acceder, puedes revisar, pero es que yo necesito algo más que acceder y revisar, ¿no? Porque estoy trabajando con material visual. Necesito tomar un archivo de esto, fotografiarlo o que me lo impriman. Y ahí te encontrabas con una serie de problemas. Entonces, en algunos archivos, como en Salamanca, sí podías dar un listado y te podían imprimir algunas copias, ¿no? Pagando, por supuesto. Y en otros archivos, pues podías tomar alguna fotografía tras conversar con la persona que estaba a cargo de la colección y tras varios días estando allí conseguir una relación un poco más íntima, podías conseguir que te dejaran tirar varias fotografías, ¿no? Y entonces, pues podías conseguir algo más de lo que en principio podías haber conseguido. Y en otros contextos, pues es muy similar. En el caso de Cuba también. O sea, trabajar en la Biblioteca Nacional, pues al principio $1 por fotografía. Claro, pues cuando eres un estudiante de doctorado, pues no tienes esos fondos. Si tienes que trabajar con un amplio material, ¿no? Con un archivo enorme que luego quieres, bueno, pues utilizar durante los años del doctorado o quizá más allá, ¿no? Entonces, accesibilidad es fundamental. Y los costes de la accesibilidad también, ¿no?
Sí, sorprende mucho que en la época en la que estamos, con un acceso a la tecnología absolutamente brutal, tengamos esas restricciones. En algunos casos son puramente económicos, es decir, para muchos centros ese acceso al material es una fuente de financiación importante y hay que entenderlo, son centros que tienen financiación muy baja. En otros es simplemente por una cuestión de legalismo llevado al extremo, que supongo que tendremos que ver cómo se pueden hacer, porque es que lo que no tiene sentido hoy en día es con el acceso tan grande que tenemos a la imagen, que no se puede acceder, siempre que sea compatible, evidentemente, con los derechos de autor, pero se debe presuponer que un investigador no está haciendo fotos para publicarlas. o que se garantice que son de baja calidad o algo así para que se puedan utilizar para investigación, pero no para, o sea, que se pueda buscar algún tipo de solución intermedia para que eso se pueda hacer sin llegar a tener ese nivel de intimidad con los del archivo.
Si puedo añadir un poco a esto, exactamente, sí. Por ejemplo, si nosotros estamos consultando archivos y estamos trabajando con un texto, se puede copiar, ¿no? O sea, a mano, la cita, etcétera. Pero si estás escribiendo algo y necesitas volver a consultar una imagen, no la puedes estar copiando, dibujando para consultar, ¿no? Entonces, simplemente para ayudar en el proceso de la escritura o tal, no se puede estar allí. Entonces, ese tipo de acceso es lo que estamos hablando. Y obviamente, como dice Álvaro, esa imagen que tú estás tomando rápidamente con tu móvil no es para volver a publicar o vender o lo que sea, ¿no? Es para trabajar y para precisamente difundir este conocimiento, este material, etcétera, ¿no? Entonces, como las instituciones, en vez de ayudar, ¿no? Este proceso, de una manera u otra están como poniendo trabas, ¿no? Y me parece que, por ejemplo, también en cada país europeo es diferente, ¿no? O sea, en Italia, si estás trabajando, ya puedes tomar fotos con tu móvil de todo, ya no necesitas hacer fotocopias, nadie te hace fotocopias de un libro, todavía tienen problemas con los manuscritos y tal, pero todo el mundo lo hace así como, ¿no? Y todo el mundo mira para otro lado porque todo el mundo entiende que se necesita acceso y todo el mundo está allí ¿no? O sea, no se puede estar allí 3 meses, estamos 4 días, estamos 2 semanas con bolsas de trabajo, etcétera, para hacer una investigación que no se puede hacer con todo el tiempo del mundo, con todo el dinero del mundo.
Sí, quizá también lo que habría que hacer es, desde las propias instituciones académicas, fomentar acuerdos a nivel estatal o europeo en que pues, exista un estatus para el investigador a la hora de acceder a las imágenes. Sería una cuestión ya de empezar a ver cómo, por ejemplo, hay que recordar que es que el derecho de cita desapareció en la legislación europea. Tú ya no puedes utilizar una imagen en un libro sin tener derechos, aunque sea una cita directa de la imagen. Legalmente no puedes. Solo se puede utilizar aquí, en el espacio del aula. Claro, vamos a ver cómo podemos congeniar todo, que no es lo mismo el espacio docente que el espacio de investigación, y quizás sí que es el momento de que las instituciones académicas pues empiecen a trabajar ese tema para favorecer que sus investigadores puedan acceder a los fondos audiovisuales que cada vez son más tema de investigación. Ya no solo estoy hablando de cómic, de ilustración, de cine, de fotografía, que todas tienen el mismo problema.
Y en las editoriales americanas académicas, por ejemplo, tienen muy claro esto lo de los derechos. Yo no sé si la gente tiene experiencia aquí publicando cosas con ilustraciones, pero, por ejemplo, no solamente hay derechos de imagen, pero también hay derechos de distribución. Nosotros, para publicar, por ejemplo, imágenes en los Estados Unidos, necesitamos comprar la imagen, por ejemplo, del Reino Sofía y pagar a los de IVAP, o como se llame, exacto, para que nos permitan distribuir. Y claro, y allí, por ejemplo, chocamos con la política de copyrights en los Estados Unidos, que no es por los derechos de allí de protección son por porcentaje de la obra, ¿no? Entonces, tú puedes citar 300 palabras, pero ¿cómo citas una imagen si no la reproduces al %, ¿no? Entonces, es imposible obtener ese tipo
Sí,
a menos que sean cedidos por el autor, que es la ruta que muchos de nosotros tomamos.
Bueno, pero que incluso eso tiene problemas, ¿eh? La VEGAP, ¿dónde está? La VEGAP es absolutamente voraz en su búsqueda de dinero. Y yo te puedo dar un ejemplo, y es que yo escribí en 2007, hace 15 años, un libro sobre la historia del cómic valenciano, que era profusamente ilustrado, y nada más publicarse, vino VEGAP con una factura de 8.000 euros. Para un libro con una distribución, seamos claros, ínfima. Es que o sea, ¿cómo compatibilizas eso? Y resulta que tú no le puedes pedir permiso al autor. Aquí en España no se podía. ¿Por qué? Porque los derechos de gestión de las imágenes son de la VEGAP. Es la VEGAP la que tiene. Y el autor no puede decir, no, la VEGAP le dice, no, tú vas a cobrar sí o sí. Entonces dice, bueno, pero es que si el autor me ha dicho que me da permiso, da igual.
Bueno, pues gracias por estas aportaciones y comentarios muy interesantes. Vamos a seguir adelante con